Hello, I'm Terry Kolath. I'm here today with Professor Adrian Kerr, and we're talking about a 5-session series he's doing for us this summer, and the topic is Ancient Rome, the history of its rise and fall. Thank you for joining me, Adrian.
Thank you, Terry. It's always a privilege to be here at Shell Point.
Well, let's give a little bit of an overview about why we're looking at Ancient Rome.
Ancient Rome spanned probably about 1,000 years, which most people are surprised at when you say. But Rome was still influencing the world all the way through till 1200 in the Middle Ages because of the Eastern Roman Empire. Most people think that the Roman Empire conked out around 450 AD when the barbarians conquered Rome. And so that's a fair assumption. But of course, those kingdoms that formed the barbarian kingdoms of France and Italy and Spain carried on using Roman style, Roman clothes, Roman language. So they became the medieval countries that we know today. Meanwhile, in the East, the Roman Empire carried on for another 1,000 years. Constantinople was the center. This was the richest part of the empire and was able to fend off invasions and attacks from barbarians and Persians and eventually Turks. And finally it fell around 1400 by the Ottomans, and then it became part of the Ottoman Empire known as Istanbul. So the Roman Empire spreads probably 1,500 years and has had a huge influence. Today, for instance, we look around us and we see Roman roads, which are 1,000 years old. We see Roman castles, we see Roman baths, we see colosseums, we see forums, we see wonderful cities in the desert, North Africa, which were abandoned because they ran out of water, but we can see exactly what those cities look like. And of course, there's the cultural things as well. We speak a language which came out of Latin, and we have part of our law is Roman law. Our months of the year are named after Roman gods, and so on. That a lot of what we do today is Romanesque. Very impressed. The Romans were remarkable, and we admire them because although they were rather brutal in their way in which they conquered cities and towns and areas like Gaul, for instance, they were ruthless people, but then it was a ruthless world in those days. They also brought civilization. The Pax Romanorum. So if you were conquered, that was bad news, but then you got the benefits. You got the benefits of running water, stability, the army protected you from invaders, they had police forces, they had good roads, and they had law systems, judges, courts, etc. And so it was quite something in those dark ages to actually have an empire like Rome which spread from Scotland all the way to Baghdad. It was a huge area. And of course, they had a common system. That was the marvelous thing about the Roman Empire. Unlike the Greeks, who were all city-states and vying amongst themselves for supremacy and never created a uniform empire, the Romans had one emperor, one language, one set of laws, and they applied them to the whole of the greatest empire in the West at that time.
We are at Session 4, the Empire Peaks. What do we have in store for ourselves this week with the Empire? Well,
the Roman Empire has now been running for about 300 years. It's gone through the Republic phase. It's now clearly run by emperors. And we reached that period called the 5 Good Emperors. And the reason why they're called that is because each of them was strong, great leadership, military control, and relatively not corrupt. And the 5 great emperors ruled Rome for 120 years, and they were successful in actually passing on power from one to the other when they died by choosing not their sons, but identifying an adopted son and preparing him to take over as emperor. And so by good identification of successors and putting them in place before they died, the continuity of this 150 years or so was outstanding. And this is the great periods of Marcus Aurelius and Trajan and Hadrian. These are great, Antoninus Pius. And they expanded the empire to its fullest extent and was the dominant power in Europe, of course, and into the Middle East. And this was the height of the Roman Empire, the greatest wealth and the greatest stability. But of course, that period had to come to an end, and we started to see fragmentation and less good leaders coming forward, and of course the pressure of empire, the financial constraint of having large numbers of centurions on the edges of the empire, the Parthians in Persia and the barbarians across the Rhine, that became such a pressure that the empire started to crack. And so it's the lead up to the next stage of the attacks on Rome.
So this is a crucial piece of history that prepares us for the next session, session 5.